right, so in this video, we're going to go a little more in depth into terrain. Now, remember I had spoke about terrain in some previous videos that it's a little bit quirky in Point Blank because there's a couple ways that terrain gets resolved, a couple of time frames, especially during your upkeep phase. You do have resolutions when it comes to your terrain cards. Now, at the beginning of a scenario, it will show you your little map here, and it'll show you certain terrain cards will start on the map, and you'll have your deck of terrain cards. So it'll tell you how to set this up and which specific cards go on the map. So that part's easy. However, you will have circumstances like looking at our tank here. It's wanting to perform a move action over here into this sector, and there's no terrain cards present. That's going to happen during the game, so you'll have to resolve those by either drawing or sometimes terrain cards will be played to those sectors. Before we continue on, do want to make sure I mention that when it comes to armored fighting vehicles, they can exist in terrain that has buildings because they're not technically in the building. They're next to the building. They do receive a defensive bonus, but for gameplay purposes, they're not technically inside the building. They're just, adjacent to it, driving through the town. So some terrain cards have special properties that will be listed down on them. So there is a list in the back of the rule book that shows all the different terrain cards, whether it requires bogging checks, whether it can be refused, all that good stuff is listed in the back of the rule book. But as an example here, looking at a road card, these ones that have roads on them do provide a bonus that units, they can move into it without causing the unit to become spent when they perform their move. So I'd also mention that terrain cards can be potentially refused, or some of them can't be refused. So I'm going to show a couple examples here from the rulebook that kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So let's say we have our Easy 8 here, our Sherman. It's moving over here, so a terrain card has to be resolved, but there's no terrain card here. However, the opponent plays a terrain card from their hand and they play a marsh card. Well, when you look at that marsh card, it says right here in the bottom of it that it may not be refused. So when they place that card there, this player does not get the opportunity to refuse that card. So they do have to move into it. And a marsh is not a good card for a armored fighting vehicle to move into. There's bogging checks and all that good stuff that happens. So that's why the opponent would want to play that card there, since they can't refuse it and they move into this bad terrain. Let's say instead, though, the opponent played a clear card as the terrain for that sector. A clear terrain card can be refused, unlike the marsh card. So what will happen is if the Sherman here decides that they don't want to move into this, they're refusing that terrain, they don't want to move into that clear terrain. Instead, they're going to remain in the sector that they're in, but any move markers or fatigue markers, any of that stuff is going to remain on the tank, and the terrain card that is played is going to remain in that sector as well. And like I said, there's easy ways to determine all of this stuff. It is listed in the back of the rule book. There's also a player aid that'll show you all this information that you need. What type of defensive bonus? Can the terrain be refused? Do you have to check for bogging? Its line of sight? All that is listed right here, so you have easy access to it.